This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net and Avoid the Maze. It's stories about our journeys. And I don't care who you are on a journey. And if you don't like the journey you're on, you are the only one who can change it. And I know that sounds a little cliche, and there are people out there saying, but what can I do? Well, you know what? It took me 60 years to look in the mirror and say, hey, there's something I can do. And I'm so glad that I did. And I'm not going to worry about the fact that it took me 60 years because I am going forward. My guest today is Maccabee Griffin. And Maccabee, when I read your bio on Podmatch, I have a feeling, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling a lot of your transformation happened after you got out of the service. Is that correct?
Yeah. A lot of it happened after. There was some that happened before, but mostly after, yes. For To give a little bit of context, I was in the military, the United States Army, for 9.5 years. During that time, I was known as a unit supply clerk / sergeant at one point. Never had the rank, but I held the position. So I was doing supervisory work for a clerk. And after a couple of deployments, I had uh, injured myself a little bit, and there were some mental issues that came up to play after being, blown up a few times here and there, or dealing with just battles in general.
Right.
Mostly my battles were on convoys. It was never a shootout or anything. It was just more of IEDs or improvised explosive devices that was on the side of the roads or in the middle of said
That can be just
roads.
as bad.
Oh yeah, especially when you have mortar rounds that are about 3.5, 4 feet long, chained together under concrete. So yeah, it was definitely fun, let me tell you. But after I got out of the military, I had a new, my family was starting to grow a little bit more. I had to figure out what I wanted to do, if I was going to go to school for logistics, which is what I was doing. But when I went to school, there was a lot of things that wasn't, clicking through that. So I went and did my duty as a father, as a husband, and did the jobs that I didn't like to do, but I did them anyways. So there's a lot of things that come after that, but it
Sure.
was kind of interesting.
As you talk about the military, so many of us have no concept of what it really means to be in the military.
Mhm.
Um, and as you described yourself as a supply clerk, probably the average person sees you in a building in a nice, comfortable place, and you're just passing out supplies. But you can be out in the middle of a field somewhere doing that as well. And I congratulate you for stating that there were some emotional, mental issues going on because
Mhm.
we all go through that. And
Yeah.
when we deny it, we can't get over it or at least move through it. So, so many things that you just said in that short amount of time. I'm like sitting here going, you've gone through a lot and look where you are today. And I know it didn't
Yeah.
happen overnight. So, what were
Yeah.
some of the things that made you say, hey, school just is not clicking? I have to be a father, I have to be a husband. But you know what? I have to be me.
Mhm. Well, after I got out, I was still in the search of me. I believed for a very long time prior to the service that I was going to be an actor. I was going to be someone on Broadway. That was my thing. I loved theater. I didn't like studying theater, but I loved doing it. And there was a point where, even after I thought about it, but after a while, it would just seem that it was more of a hobby more than anything else. So I really didn't have that passion for it. The things that really made me say, hey, I got to step back is just because of the fact that I was having so many spasms. I have what's called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures. In a nutshell, basically means that I have spasms that are connected to stress that my mind believes that is stressful, not my brain, but my mind. And whatever the stress level is depending on how severe these spasms can be. So I can have them for, a couple of seconds to I've had them up to 8, 9 hours straight before,
Wow.
and been hospitalized for it 3 times. I had to go to the emergency room while I was still in the service. So I still have to deal with them. I just have them somewhat under control now, or at least I can tell how much time I have in between each of these spasms. So being a stay-at-home dad, being someone who's trying to build up his own empire and belief that he can still take care of his family, even though literally everything in the world is basically saying, no, you cannot. I'm still trying to push back to it, but I'm also trying to deal with my own demons, my own laziness, my own um, diversities of pain that goes along with it. So there's a lot of things that I'm still dealing with, but I've over time gotten better at it after I've gotten out. So
And that is something that I started really understanding about a year ago. I took this course in positive intelligence and realized that how many tricks we actually allow our minds to play on us,
mhm,
because we do have control to a
mhm,
great degree. And I like how you separated the mind away from the brain, because the brain isn't necessarily causing me to think a certain way. Okay. It's my mind. It's the things that I've learned in my past and I've held on to.
mhm.
And it's not easy to make those changes. But what I'm hearing that you have done is you now accept that these things may happen, but I need to be more mindful. I need to be prepared for it so that I can do the best that I can do to get through these. A lot of people would sit back and go, it's too much work.
No, they ain't wrong. You ain't wrong on that. Getting out of the victim mindset and into the abundance mindset is very difficult. It's always going to be challenging. The best way that I've expressed it, and I did this to my sister yesterday because she was still trying to understand. She's 21 years old. She's still a baby. I'm 43. I've got a lot more experience than she does at a lot of things. But in this case, the best way I was able to express it to her is that we're all basically something a piece of furniture from IKEA. I used a cabinet for her in this example, and we've noticed that a lot of the parts when we're putting this cabinet together is there's damage. And now those pieces can be replaced in and out as long as the production of said product is
Right.
still in manufacturing moment. But the thing that we always have a difficulty is that we are using an older mistranslated instruction book, and we're not looking at the original booklet that came with it. And so sometimes it's very hard for us to try to build this said cabinet to where it's supposed to be, where it's looking beautiful, the parts are coming in and everything, when you're using the wrong manual. But when we get to that point when we can actually remove said manual, burn it, disparate, whatever you got to do to get rid of it, and we go back to the original manual that came with the product, then it's easier for us to put things together because everything's already there. We just have to be willing to look at the manual. And for men, that's kind of hard because we like to just throw the manuals away and just,
Of course.
oh, I know exactly what we got to do. A, B, C, go to D, we good. But unfortunately, there's a lot of times where A, B, C, D, and E do not go together, and A, B, and B are supposed to be together, not A, B, and D, D.
Well, and because we're all unique beings,
Mhm.
even that manual, if we follow it exactly, for some of us, some things may need to be tweaked. And that's something that we can only tell somebody. If you're building me
Mhm.
and you're following the manual, because the manual says, you put your right arm on the right side and the left arm on the left side. And I say to you, you know what? That's not how it works for me. How it
Mhm.
works for me is that you have to switch them.
Right.
And
And that's why you have to have those two different manuals, because one is the one that originally came with us, with our spirit, with our body, with everything that was there. And the other one is the one that the world decided, hey, we're just going to transcribe this one to make it easier for you. So they're cutting out all the very important parts of the instructions from the original one to give you a very world viewpoint of the summary of what you're supposed to be and not what you actually are.
so part of coming home from the service, becoming a stay-at-home dad,
Mhm.
that had to have been a big change for you. Number one, in the service, everything was regimented. Now
Mhm.
you're coming home, and typically, and I hate to use this because my husband was a stay-at-home dad, part of our life together, but the vision from everybody on the outside is, dad should be out there 9 to 5 working
Mhm.
and mowing the lawn and doing all these other things, while mom does something else. So how was that for you in making your transition?
So when I got out of the military, it was still I went did the work. She stayed home because she was still pregnant too with our second baby. So it was more of this traditional sense of mom stayed home, she took care of the kids, she took care of the house, did what she had to do, and then dad was at work. But when mom wanted to go to school, we said, okay, great. That's fine by me. You want to get an education? Go for it. Do what you got to do. I am very open to that because I love my smart wife because my wife is a lot smarter than me. So anything that makes her smarter makes my life easier. And we had that point where she went to become a radiation therapist. She went to school, she got her degree, she got her job. And in this case, instead of her following me around for my job, I decided, hey, we're leaving. We're going to be moving closer to her job. She's going to make more than I am easily. Why not? So I stayed home. I did voiceover stuff because I was getting into the voiceover a little bit more. I was only, while I was doing a full time job, I was still doing part time voiceover.
Sure.
So now it became okay, my wife is willing to take the reins on our finances. Why not? So she was willing to allow me to follow my dream. And then that, as it was, started to fade away a little bit. So not really fading away, transitioning, I should say, evolving into something different. And then she did her thing. Things happened. She left. She did something else. And now I'm doing both again. I'm helping her with I can by door dashing, but while I'm still creating this empire known as Beyond the Pen. So,
And one of the things that we talked about in an earlier podcast today, because I love where you're coming from. You're building your empire, but your empire may not necessarily look like hers or
mhm,
somebody else's. Um,
absolutely.
when you were working full time, you were doing something that you enjoyed, which were the voiceovers, so
Mhm,
that once you left that full time job, you could do that a little bit more. You already had your foot in the door. And sadly, there are so many individuals out there who say, because I'm working 9 to 5 or whatever their job is, I can't do the things I love. And I thought that for a very long time.
Yeah.
And right around my 60th birthday, I woke up and I said, why can't I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm at work 50, 60 hours a week. But there are things I can even do at work that I really love to do. And then I can translate that over onto the weekend and do those things. And I found when I started doing that, it was like my world started to open up. And we all have that opportunity. The problem is we sit back and we just use that word, I can't.
Yep. That's the thing right there is, if you're willing to stay in that victim mindset of, oh, I can't do this because of A, B, C, D, or E, then A, B, C, D, and E are always going to rule your life. They're always going to tell you exactly what it is. There are tips and tricks and every little thing to get you financially stable to where you don't have to be at a job, because a job is only going to give you what you give it.
Exactly.
And it's only going to give you what it's willing to tell you you are worth. And so, and a lot of times we're dealing with this for generations because school is not there to make you smarter. It's there to train you on how to become a better employee, not an employer, an employee, because it tells you how to memorize things, how to follow along with the rules, and sometimes how to be a leader, depending on what activities outside of the classroom that you're working with. Now, again, depending on what classroom you're at
Right.
and where you're located at, there are certain things that come with that. But overall, it's always been the same. I tell you all this information. Your job is to memorize it. Your job is to use it. And then by the time you become an adult, 90% of that is going to be worthless.
Unless you go on Jeopardy.
Unless you go on Jeopardy, then that's a whole different ballgame right there.
Exactly.
But it also has to be that when you want to be willing to take that chance, you're going to be willing to look at the passion that you have in your life, what makes you happy, what doesn't make you happy, remove the things that are making you miserable, and then seeing how clear your vision is. The great thing someone told me a long time ago is that everybody goes through a storm, and the storms are not bad. Storms are great to have because, one, they push you forward, and two, they clear the area around you. They get rid of the distractions. They remove all those barriers that have been put up in front of you. Now it's your job to depend on whether or not you're willing to actually pass forward or stick around and try to rebuild what you have around you.
You know, it's interesting. I was one of my first coaching jobs or coaching clients was somebody who I sort of knew. We weren't friends, but I knew enough about this person. And she said, I really need to gain your positivity. I want to work with you. But what I found was every time we had a session, I was hearing the words, oh, you do that so well. I'll never be able to do that. Or I can't do that because people expect me to do something else. And I said to her, finally, I think it was like the second session, this isn't working. Until you can look at all those I can'ts and find at least one that you can tell me that you can, you're not ready to move forward. And
Right.
I've been there. I know that. Okay. When I was growing up, my grandfather, my father, my brothers were prolific writers. You could give them a subject and wow, they came up with a poem, a story, whatever. And I tried so hard. I wanted to be like them. And every time I would show my father something I wrote, in a very nice and loving and kind way, he'd say, honey, leave the writing to the men of the family. And I believed I couldn't write.
Mhm.
When I guess it was maybe I was in my mid 40s and I thought, I want to do a legacy of my mother's recipes. But I don't want just to be a cookbook. I want stories to go behind it. So I started interviewing friends, family, whatever. And I put together this cookbook with stories. And I presented it to my dad. And he just sat there beaming. He said, so you wrote with passion.
Mhm.
Now you get it. And I just looked at him like, well, why didn't you tell me that years ago? But I wouldn't have understood it.
Yeah.
So if you have passion, there's so much that you can do. And obviously that's what you have as you visualize where you want to go with life.
I struggle with my passion many days. I do. And it's not an easy thing. It's something that for me is very difficult. Now, earlier I said that school is there just to teach you to be an employee, not an employer. The system is there to do that.
Right.
Teachers, the people that make what a school is, are there to teach you how to be human and to inspire you, to encourage you. And I had lots of people in my life that have encouraged me. The question that I have always put to myself is, am I passionate enough for this to push me and drive me to do what I'm doing? There are many days where I'm sitting down laying, I'm like, no, not today. Today's not the day. Today is not the passion day. So I'm not going to do a lot of things today that deal with that. And then there are days that like, oh yeah, I am revved up, ready to go. I am passionate about this and that. And I will do it and I will get a lot of things done. You have to understand yourself. And a lot of great men have said this, and a lot of great men have denied this. So it's always up for a great discussion of whether or not it's true or not. But overall, the feeling is that if you are very passionate about something a certain day, you will notice that that is the day that you truly will get a lot of things done. You will be so driven for it, you will be focused on it. And then there's those days where your cup is low that you don't have that passion. And that's fine. That's okay. Find something that's going to fill your cup back up, whatever it may be, your faith, your family, your friends, just doing absolutely not a dang thing the whole day just to recover. Do it, because that's going to help you to fill that passion up. Here's the other problem with that I've found that a lot of people have issues with. They start to question whether or not they have passion or not. When you start questioning why you're doing something, for instance, for me, like I said, with my show is Beyond the Pen. I interview authors about them, their books, and everything that goes with it, their story behind the story.
Sure.
I also educate them on the publishing world. That's the other thing that we're doing. I have a friend that is my co-host. She's written tons of books in a short amount of time and been successful. I've got a friend of mine who does the editing for me. He helps me out. He says he loves doing the audio video stuff. That is his passion. He loves doing it. She loves writing, and she was thrown into it. This was not her journey at all, but she became a well-known publisher, a published author. Me, and this is the irony in the whole thing. I don't like reading books. I am
Okay.
not passionate about reading books, but I am passionate about storytelling. That's why when we're on the show, I look at everything from an actor's point of view, because it's completely different from a writer's point of view. And so we're able to work together to bring out real, true storytelling, about storytelling, to encourage storytellers. There's many days where I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't even care about books. I don't care about writing. I don't care about this or that. those are the days that I start to notice that I get very low on that passion. So in the end, if you start questioning it, even if it's working and you're having fun with it and you're seeing all the positives of it, stop questioning it. Just do it. Just absolutely just do it. Because when you start to question, that's when the demons start to come into your head saying, oh, what? Why do this? Just stop doing it. Don't do
Now, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I do love what I'm doing. I love podcasting. And as you probably noticed, as we were trying to arrange, even for today's show, this past year, I went through some huge changes, because for the year before, I was doing anywhere from 4 to 5 recordings a day, 5 days a week. Loved it. But I would look at the calendar and go, okay, so now I have somebody in a half hour. And I'd be sitting here thinking, maybe they won't show up.
Yep.
But as soon as they did show up, I was excited and was like, oh, I'm so glad that they showed up. But I did have to sit down and ask myself, what is going on? And then I got sick, and I had more time to say to myself, okay, what's going on? And I realized, just because I have a passion for something doesn't mean I have to be obsessive about it. And that's what it was. I thought I was proving to all my guests, all my listeners, look how much she puts into this. And then I started thinking about the average radio announcer out there. They don't put in that much energy. They have a whole crew. They have somebody who runs the camera, runs the mics, puts on their makeup, and tells them which stories to read. And I was doing it all. And it's because of some of the things that you just said that I was doing it, but I was doing it for the wrong reasons, and I was questioning myself. And once I sat there, and I remember in June being in the hospital, lying on this bed because nobody knew what was wrong with me, and they said, do not move. My brain went a mile a minute. It was like, I know how to move. I know what I need to do. I cannot do one show after another every single day. And I'm going to pick and choose the subjects. I'm not just going to say, hey, Maccabee sounds like such a great person, I'm going to have him on. No, I'd go back and reread bios. And I have to tell you, some of the people that I had scheduled for the beginning of this year when I was ill, I've written back to them, and some of them I've said, right now, you're just not a good fit.
Yeah.
Because if I can't have this conversation with you, guess what? It's not going to help you. It's not going to help me. And our listeners are going to pick up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the listeners are the true testimonies of our passions.
So how did it become Beyond the Pen? You already said you don't like to write. You don't like to read. So,
okay. When I was a voice actor, I'm still a voice actor, but I haven't done anything for like 2 years, and it drives me nuts sometimes too. But I digress. One day when I was dealing with trying to figure out where I was going to go with this, and I noticed the trends that were going on in the voiceover world, what was going on in the publishing world, and found that audiobooks were always on the rise. They're going to be continuously on the rise, forecast wise, for the next 3-4 years. So I decided, hey, I'm going to start going directly after the authors. I'm going to start reading these novels, these short stories, whatever the case may be, to get my voice out there. And then when I was in a group, online group, one of the gentlemen that I was getting to know real well there said, hey, I'm about to go to this online book fair. Why don't you come in? You have so much information and research about audiobooks. why don't you go and just talk to them about this a little bit more? I said, sure, why not? Maybe I'll get some clients out of it. We'll go with that. So I did, and I told people about this. And trust me, there was a lot of authors that were like, really? This is what I didn't know this. Because 9% of the time, people don't know about audiobooks and from the voiceover side, at least.
Right.
So the gentleman that was in charge of it said, hey, what would you do if someone gave you a show? I said, I'd take it. They're like, okay, what would you call it? I was like, your legacy, because I always think and enjoy people's stories because they're so unique to themselves. Not so much the same situations, but to themselves and the way that they see
Right.
it. And after I was like, okay, so how about in a week, you have an online show and call it Your Legacy live from Indianapolis with Maccabee Griffin. I'm like, okay, sure. And the gentleman said, we'll help you get some guests, but you're gonna have to get the first one and we'll work from there. Like, okay, sure. So I asked a friend of mine to be on there. He said yes. And then as I was going to pick up my son from ABA therapy, my wife said, hey, I think you need to change it. I'm like, why? Like, well, why don't you're waiting to do the audiobooks. Why don't you just have people on the show that are already authors, and then you can start talking to them about it. And maybe you guys can work something out. I was like, okay, that sounds a lot better. Smart wife.
Right.
Again. So as I was going to pick up my son from ABA therapy, I called him up and I said, hey, I think I need to change the show title and the whole aspect of it. So we went through it and I told him what was going to be. And for some reason, as I'm going down 465, the main highway around Indianapolis, he goes, what'd you call it? I said, Beyond the Pen. I was like, that is perfect. I was like, okay, good. That's where it's going to be. And that's pretty much how it came about. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, doing this.
And interestingly enough, that really talks about that it's not just what's written down. You have to hear the story as well. And
Yes.
I will tell you, I love audiobooks because I find that with an audiobook, I create these visions in my head, whereas, and I hate to say it, I used to be an avid reader. I get tired reading.
Yeah.
And then I forget who the characters are. But this, I can go back and I can re-listen to something and see those pictures in my head, which, stories help us move forward. There's a lot of things
Absolutely.
are on those pages that when we hear them, it's like, wow, wonder if I tried that. I wonder if that's how people see me. And I love the fact that you love sharing stories because I think that is so important in our society today. We've been told for so many years, that we sort of need to conform. But the fact is, we're not going to. We're human.
Right.
We are going to be individuals.
Yeah.
We are going to do things differently. I picked up on the therapy that your son is going through, and my son, also being on the spectrum, went through ABA therapy. But where he was on the spectrum, after the second session, he said to them, this is not for me. 7 years old. And they said, no, no, no. And he said, no, I'm going to tell you why it's not for me. And they looked at him, they called me up and they said, this isn't working. And I said, because he takes things very literally. So that's the therapy that he needs. And it changed. That's where I say we're all so unique that there's not one size fits all for anything anymore.
Nope. And that's the one thing I truly love about stories, and the reason why I prefer to help make them better, because there are some people that still call me up every once in a while or send me text or messages and say, "Hey, I've got this story going on. Can you help me to work it out a little bit?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I'm not any certified coach or anything like that. I am not a writer. I love telling stories. I love writing and creating stories, but it's the idea that they're coming to me because I'm looking at things from a different point of view,
Exactly.
and it makes it easier for them. Same thing with storytelling. We've all seen how storytelling, when money gets involved, time management gets involved, that the stories themselves start to diminish in their quality. And you don't get the connections with the characters. You don't get connections with the storytellers. And so it makes it hard for said people who've put so much work into it to get the rewards that they deserve.
Absolutely.
And that's why we have people on the strikes right now. That's why the executives are getting so angry about everything right now. But out of all that, we have to give people a chance to tell their stories. That's
Exactly.
why you have this show. That's why I have my show. That's why we have so many people out there that are willing to sit down with you and allow you to tell your story, because they are so important. We all know what happened when we were during the pandemic. It was horrible because humans, Homo sapiens, whatever you want to call us,
Yeah,
spirits in general, we are a social group. We have to be social. Even if you're an introvert and you hate people, you're still somewhat of
yeah,
a social person. Every
absolutely.
once in a while, every once in a while. Um, but when those stories weren't around, we were slowly just dying. And that's why people started to reach out to people so much over the internet. Thank God we had the internet.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Oh, I sometimes wonder what it must have been like in 1917 with the flu epidemic. You know, the story that my father told, and of course was told to him by his parents.
Mhm,
My father was born in June 1917,
mhm,
and in August of that year, he got the flu. And
mhm,
his parents were basically told, take him home, keep him comfortable, your son's going to die.
mhm.
And my grandmother and grandfather did not believe that. Um, and my father obviously made it.
Obviously.
Um, but I think back, who did you talk to about it at that time? Your next door neighbor who didn't really know much more than you do,
Mhm,
okay, who probably was afraid to even talk to you because now you have this sick, dying child.
mhm.
Um, and yet, when the pandemic happened for us in 2019, you're right, people took to the internet. They were asking questions. They were telling you that they have a loved one who's in a hospital and they can't even go see them. And people were reaching out and providing virtual hugs,
Mhm.
virtual understanding. And I think if we can keep that going, we're going to have people who are going to be happier going forward. We're not
Yes.
going to have the expectations of, I've got to take this job and make X amount of money and live in this house and furnish it a certain way.
I do have to agree with that. I have to also give props to this new generation of adults because they are changing the way society rules. Sometimes in the greatest way, and other times not so much. But that's another discussion for another time. The fact is that they're willing to sit down and say, I know my worth, and my worth and your worth, or at least the thoughts on them, are not the same. So I'm just going to leave. And that way you can find someone else to take my place. Because that's why, and when I said a job is not the same as a career helps you to improve yourself. A
Right.
job is there just for you to stay there and help someone else do better. So with this generation, and thanks because I have my sister actually living with us a little bit longer. She's 21. Like I said, she is still learning, but she's also teaching me that some of the statements, some of the thoughts that we've had to deal with, we've given excuses for, are not the truth, no matter how much we think they are. And no matter how much we want to allow our next generation to get successful, to become successful, there's some of those things that we are saying, oh, this is how you're going to be successful. That's not going to be their success. I had an interview with Mr. Jeff Hoffman on one episode. It's actually going to be coming up on Thursday. He is the gentleman who was the creator of Priceline.com, BetU.com, as well as a few other ones that are out there. Bookit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things he said is that everybody's vision of success is completely different from one another. One person may say, hey, my vision of success and knowing that I finally got there is that I have this huge yacht. And they're willing to give up everything else. They've lost their family, they've lost their friends, they lost some of their life in general, but they have the yacht, and that's their success. But as he was on the yacht with this gentleman, and they were going out, a storm was coming in. And this is what I'm saying, that storms change everything. And as they were coming back, because hey, you don't want to be on those
Right.
seas with a storm, another gentleman's yacht came by that was twice the size of this gentleman's. And as he saw that, he goes, we need to go back because I need to work harder to get that yacht. He was so into that position of this materialistic thing is that's what's going to show me that I'm successful, comparative to a lot of people now that are finally waking up, me included. I'm still somewhat drowsy, but I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Is that family, friends, loved ones around us, the experiences in our lives, these are the things that are going to build up on a legacy, not a yacht that's going to be in the water just rusting away from the sea salt. That thing's going to freaking sink in the next 10 years. But your legacy that you've worked so hard to build up is going to last generations. And even if it's not everybody's going to know everything about you, my generation, 3 generations from now, are probably not going to know anything about me. But if they are willing to search and find out anything about me, at least they know there's stuff out here about me that I'm proud
Absolutely.
of. And their children, their parents, their great parents, my children are going to be willing to say, hopefully, God willing, hey, he was a good guy. He had some problems, but he was willing to get better.
Love
And
it.
to me, honestly, that's a better legacy than a yacht that's going to rust.
Well, how can my listeners find you, listen to you, and pick up some of your wisdom?
First off, stop going down the highways to get your wisdom because there's none left. You have to actually build your own roads and leave some wisdom behind for everybody else to pick up that's coming behind you or coming beside you. People can go and find us at beyondthepenpodcast.com. That where you can find my bios, you can find my links to social media, as well as my co-host, Miss C.R. Rice, or Chelsea to everybody who knows her. And you can listen to a bunch of our episodes on there. I'm going to be removing some episodes because of certain things that have happened in the background, but you still have plenty of episodes to go through, lots of tips and tricks. If you're a writer who wants to get better at it or you need encouragement, come join us. We have new episodes up every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 5 a.m. hopefully most of the time that I can really get it up there in time. But Tuesdays and Thursdays, we always have a new episode. And then the videos go up on Saturdays
Oh,
by noon.
wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm going to go out and start listening to some of your podcasts now that I'm making my days, a little more reasonable, so I get to enjoy something else besides myself talking. And we look forward to seeing you in the future and having our listeners find you as well. So
Thank you so
thank
much for
you.
this opportunity. Appreciate
Wonderful. Have a great day.
you. You too. Thank you.